Hello everyone, Andrejus is speaking. Nice to see you online this evening or day if you are in US. Thank you very much for your time that you found to be online on this ADF webinar call. And this will be around 2 hours, maybe less, we'll see. And the idea is to have it really informal. And if you have questions, then you're free to type them on chat through the webinar. I'll read them one by one and I'll try to respond on every question one by one. If I'll not have answer for some of the question, then maybe I'll follow up offline later or something like that. But feel free to post questions. And in the meantime, just to give you some topics for the questions and so on, I'll go through the agenda, through the list of different tips and tricks based on sample applications posted on the blog. So maybe once I'll go through this list and I'll show you different things inside GDeveloper and ADF, then it might be that you'll have more questions based on that. If there'll be no questions, no problem as well, because I have prepared the list of the things to go through, and I hope that will be interesting anyway. So just to give you an overview of the things I'll be going through, and you should see already my screen. Let me double check if screen sharing is on. Yes, it should be fine. So firstly, I'll go through ADF topics. Like I'll go through some advices how to improve performance in ADF applications, especially for those applications where you have tables or create, read, update, delete operations, ADF criteria, and so on. Then I'll give you a couple of hints for the validation. Those hints will be based mostly on experience from different projects and based on what actually users prefer to have in validation, and some hints how to avoid some of the side effects of validation that you may get on ADF UI. Right, then another topic will be post changes. I'll try to explain why post changes can be dangerous, especially if you'll call PLC call procedures. And every topic I'll be speaking on will be based on one or another blog post. So for every topic, I'll provide URL, and you'll be able to read it later on. And probably I'll post it tomorrow on the blog, all these links for every topic I was speaking as well. I'll post it on the blog, so you'll be able to follow up later. Then another topic will be ADF entity cache and view object instances. This one is from the latest blog post I had last week. And then transaction level validation, and I'll show how you can delay validation execution to transaction level in some of the use cases. And also will give you some ideas how possibly you can implement conditional validation in ADF. Okay, then after that we'll go to new features in ADF release patch set 6 or version 1.117, like pagination and list view. We'll explain how you can implement these features, and also we'll tell you some of the areas you should keep in mind if you plan to use these new components, especially table pagination. There are some issues if you would like to set current row in a table with pagination enabled, and we'll see this later. And finally, if there will be still time left, we'll go through ADF mobile topics. So I'll explain how to implement simple login in ADF mobile, and then how to consume secure web service from ADF mobile, and as well how to use already existing ADF business components master detail relationship, and how to expose it for the web service, and how to consume it in ADF mobile in order to use master detail from business components just out of the box. So this is a list of topics for today. Let's see how much of them we'll be able to cover. And by the way, this session is recorded as well, so I'll post video recording tomorrow probably. So if you'll not hear or will not, if I'll go for some topic a bit fast, then you'll be able to watch it later online as well. So the first one, list range size -1 for LV. Okay, let me switch to GDeveloper, and I already have sample application running for that. So this application is a basic application with a single form and a list of values here. And let me, for manager ID, let me open this list of values, and you see there's a scroll bar. Then if I scroll a bit more, I see that there's a message of data fetching, and scroll bar is smaller now because more data fetched. Then if I scroll again to the end, then it scrolls more, it fetching more data and so on. And this LV is implemented based on a range paging. Range paging allows to generate such SQL statement which is appended with SQL hints, and it allows to fetch from the database only a certain range of rows. By default, this doesn't work, and in order to make it work, you need to set one property that I'll show you right now. And just let me open the object that implements this LV. Employees LV view, and here in general section in tuning, right? I have set the tuning for the access mode to be range paging, and I set range size to be 30. This means that ADF will generate specific select statements, specific SQL select statement to fetch from the database only 30 row set. But then when we define LV in employees view for, let's say, manager ID attribute, so we have LV here, right? And then from the wizard perspective, everything is fine. But what happens in the background, that if I go to the source list of values, and by default, there's a property list range size, and this property by default is set to -1. This is correct for regular LVs that are not based on range paging, and those LVs that are based on a scrolling access mode by default. So this is correct to have -1, which means that all data is fetched. So otherwise, especially if you would use a choice list, then if you would set list range size to 20, then it would fetch only 20 rows and not the rest of the data. But this is not true for the range paging, because when this default value is -1, then we can see what happens. ADF would try to fetch all data, but LV is based on range paging, and it will generate error. So in this place here, I think it's a small developer bug. It doesn't check that employees LV view is using range paging access mode, and it still generates list range size -1. So you should, if you try to implement range paging for LVs, keep in mind to double check list range size. This is very frequent error. So let's see how application will behave after I changed this setting, and you see it generates immediately on the page load error which says that row set for the LV accessor is forward only. And now if I change it back to be equal to the range size, it will start working again. So this is for the, okay, it should be 30. This is for the range paging. But then if you don't want to use range paging, we still can use this list range size property to tune a bit LV behavior and allow LV to open faster. I'll show you with the example how. Because this range paging is maybe not always you want to use it, and you just want to use the default SQL statement. And with default SQL statement, when you have list range size to set to -1, by default it will fetch all data. Right. Okay, now it's working fine. So let me go to the LOV, and I'll set default access mode here to be scrollable, and by default it's 1. Right, and then I go to employees view, and on here on LV definition, I set default list range size to be equal -1. And then I have one utility method to be written in employees LV view. I have created Java implementation class. And here I have overridden standard method create instance from result set. So this method is invoked automatically by ADF framework for each row, which is fetched to the UI from business components and, of course, from the database. So by overriding this method and including logger statement, with ADF logger, we can, or with system printout, whatever you prefer, we can print information about every row which is fetched, and this is very good to check if to check ADF form performance. When we see that ADF form opens slow, for example, we can override this method, include logger here, and then we can see how many rows are fetched. And sometimes maybe the same rows are fetched 2 or 3 times, and so on. And then this usually explains why performance of the form is slow, and you can tune it and fix based on the information that you see from the results. Okay, let me run it, and just when it starts, in order to print logger information from ADF logger, we need to double check if this logger is defined for this WebLogic instance. You can do this from integrated WebLogic server log window here in the actions. In actions, you can choose config Oracle diagnostic logging option. It opens logging XML with different loggers, and here I need to look for the logger that points to my class, this class, employees review info. Okay, I don't, okay, here's this class, employees review info. So I set logging level to info because ADF logger is printing output to the info. So I want to see info messages. I set it here. And now application is started, and I open LV. Okay, LV is opened, and in GDeveloper log, ADF logger prints quite a lot of data, quite a lot of rows. So we can see that when LV is opening, ADF is fetching all the rows from the database for this LV. Even user is to the user only 25 rows are presented, and then Obviously, when user scrolls, then those rows are retrieved from the cache and they are displayed again. But LV was opening quite slow, and in real production system, if you have 1,000 or 10,000 records in this LV, it would be really slow to fetch all the records and load them. So what optimization you can do here is you can go to LV definition for manager ID, and instead of default list range size -1, you can set to be 25, and 25 is the number of rows that by default is visible in the LV window when you load it. Now I just redeploy it and will run again to show you that with list range size 25 now it will fetch less records and LV should open a bit faster. Okay, there are several questions. And first one is, do you also change the iterator size in the bindings? So in this specific case, no, because this is LV and LV is defined on business components and there is no iterator for the LV. It's only list range size property on business components, on view object, on LV definition. Then there's another question. Will this range paging LV work for choice list components? And yeah, I think no, it doesn't work for the choice list. At least in the version that I was testing before, I was not testing exactly for the choice list in the latest patch set 6 version, but I don't think so because with choice list it will most likely it will throw this error of uh, forward only row set. And another question is quick question on the fetch size. As you mentioned, that ADF will query all the rows, but only show the data based on list range size. If you want to restrict the fetch size to what should be done. Okay. Mm. Okay, so actually this to the last question I already explaining the answer right now is in order not to fetch all the data to the UI, we just set a list range size to the value that we expect to show to the user on UI, and then here I open manager ID now. Data is fetched, and let's see the log. So there are less records fetched now. Only 25 as we specified on the list range size. Now, obviously, because only 25 records to fetch to the UI, so this scroll bar it looks bigger, right? It doesn't reflect the total number of rows that we have, but at the same time, the performance is better. And then, if user wants to get more rows, so user scrolls, and then on demand, ADF fetching more rows, next 25 rows, and so on. And yeah, really, I see in the project such situations where with default -1 setting, if LV had, let's say, 10,000 rows, then user opens such LV and user just scrolls to the end and the logic starts fetching and fetching data. And if there are concurrent users who are doing the same thing, then it just WebLogic gets a stuck thread and application is crashed. So in order to prevent users to fetch all the data, you should set this list range size to some positive value, and then the chunks that will be coming to ADF UI will be smaller. Okay, there's another question. Can you explain the difference in view object tuning options? Okay, I can do that. Let's open view object. So tuning options for the view object are in general section, and here we have tuning group. So the first one is all rows or only up to row number. This means obviously that we allow to fetch all the rows, or the row set will be restricted to a certain number. If it's set to 10, this means our row set will be only 10 rows from the database and not more. And if user would like to see the row that is not in this row set of 10 rows, then user will need to specifically to search for that row and just filter the row set in order for that row to fall into the 10 rows. It's usually is not really so useful. Most of the time we use default all rows section, and then here this in batches of by default is 1. But as we saw recently, it's very good to tune this setting in batches off and set it to be just slightly larger than your range size of the iterator in page definition. Why? Because this means that if we have default 1, then if you fetch 500 rows from the database, and if database is not on the same server as your WebLogic machine, then it will do 500 round trips to fetch 500 rows. And between WebLogic and database server on network level, there will be 500 round trips to send 500 packets. And if connection between database and WebLogic is not fast enough, this may slow down application quite a lot. So it's recommended to set in batches of by 2-3 points larger than the range size. For example, if your range size is 25, which is quite standard for ADF applications, then you set this to 28 or so. At the same time, when we were doing stress testing, if we saw that if we set in batches of to be very large, for example, 100 or so on, there's almost no difference comparing to value 28 or 30 or something like that. And actually, you can even implement dynamic code that will check the range size, and then programmatically for each ViewObject you can set in generic ViewObject implementation class the value of batches of. And then default option is to fetch as needed. So when we scroll, then we fetch. This is most typical option instead of all at once. And then there's a setting to fetch at most one row. This might be useful for single record forms, for the edit forms where you don't have tables. If your ViewObject implements just a single record, then you may choose at most one row. And if you pass a key and then you open, and then you always using some execute with params or find by key to search for the single row and then edit, then it makes sense to set at most one row, and then you'll make sure that always only one row will be fetched. And of course, such form will load a bit faster. And then no rows you use usually for such view objects where you want to implement insert. Query optimizer hint: if your database supports any query optimizer hints, you can set here. Then the specified state must be set if you want to make sure that when passivation happens, you preserve the temporary data between requests. if you use transient attributes, then if you want to make sure that the values for the transient attributes are stored as well, then you select this option. But it's not good practice to have too many transient attributes in your application, because this as well may slow down your application and make it less reliable. Because on passivation, the size of the uh, information that will be passivated and then activated from database will increase, and usually passivation activation is quite slow operation. And retain viewing accessor row set, you should set this checkbox, especially if you have ADF tree implementation or tree table. And if you, for example, if you implement menu structure as a tree, and when you expand the tree node and then you collapse and expand again, if you don't want to fetch the same data again, then you set this checkbox, and this allows ADF to remember tree data that was fetched before, so it will not fetch it again. For the nodes that were already open, closed, and open again, it will not fetch this data. So this would make your menu structure to be faster as well. Then access mode scrollable is by default, or usually, or you can use range paging as you saw earlier. Range paging doesn't work for tables, I think, and it works for the single record forms. And also, I would not recommend to use range paging if you insert delete records, because I often saw some side effects where when new row is created or row is deleted, then range paging gets corrupted and there are errors. Probably the best solution when you have lots of data, then you implement uh, some range paging to view object to search through the data, and then you have another view object instance where range paging is not applied, and then you pass primary key and you edit data in another view object instance, and view object instance with range paging enable you use only for search. Okay. Another question, why have in batches a few more than range size? What is impact performance benefit? Okay, let me understand the question. Why have in batches? Okay, this question is probably about in batches of, and why if in batches of is a bit larger than the range size, and why there is a performance benefit. Okay, so the answer is, if you look into page definition and iterator, so there is a property range size, which is by default usually 25. And this range size 25, it means that when page is loaded, so example, even in this case, when page is loaded and by default we see the one record, in the background, 25 records are fetched from the business components to ADF UI. And then if user click next, then this next record is not fetched again. It's retrieved from the cache, and then only when user will click next many times and will come to the record 26, then next 25 records will be fetched. So if to return to the question, as we saw, for example, as in this case, since we have range size 25 and 25 records are fetched, and then if we set in batches of to be equal 28 or so, then this means in one single round trip to the database, we'll fetch 28 records, for example. And then those 28 records will be in business components, and 25 records of these 28 will be sent to the UI. And otherwise, if you would have in batches of equal to 1, then ADF UI would request for the 25 records, and the business components would do a call to database 25 times and would fetch and would create row sets with each record one by one. So less round trips. And then why to have in batches of slightly larger than the range size, for example, not to have in batches of to be equal to the 25. So this is just, I would say, it's a magic number because even if when I remember I was reading article from the Steve Noon, who is a product manager for ADF, he recommends setting in batches of like a range size plus 3, just probably to guarantee in some critical situation that the packet of the set of rows that is fetched from the database is for sure enough for the range size. Yeah, and as I read now the next point from Joe Greenwald, he says that Steve Moon recommends plus 3 more. So yeah, exactly. Yes, and the scrolling is smoother. The next question is if small is scrolling is smoother with this in batches of yes, because data is retrieved from database obviously faster. So on the UI, data is loaded faster as well, and scrolling is faster. Okay, at the moment there are no more questions for this topic. So let's see what is the next on the agenda. The next one is row count threshold -1 property. Okay, this one is implemented in another application, and I'll explain why this property is important for the tuning also. Let me stop this application and switch to query optimization table application. And let me open page definition here. This iterator for the employees. I select it, and then I go to the property inspector window. And here on the advanced section, I see this property row count threshold. By default, if I click here to reset to default, the value is 0. And if I read the help for this property, it says that if row count threshold is equal to 0, then count query will be executed. And so this means when table will be loaded, then initially select count will be executed, and then select statement will be executed. So two select two SQL statements. And then if row count threshold is less than 0, then count query will not be executed. So we can set, okay, I set it to default to 0, and let me start this application. While it starts, I'll share with you one nice feature that is working in GDeveloper 11G Release 2. So as you probably know that in previous GDeveloper versions, when you was doing some UI changes, it was enough to save the file and then refresh the page. So in this new GDeveloper, additionally, we can do something similar for the page definition. If you have change in the page definition, you can do a change and then right click and click make this file. So the page definition XML file is compiled, and then you can refresh the browser and the change will appear. So there is no need to redeploy your application for the changes in page definition files, and I think in the task loss the same. Okay, so this application is loaded. Table is basic table, and here I can just scroll a bit and see that I can scroll just to the end of the row set, and data is fetched. Now, if I go and change for this iterator row count threshold to be -1, so I'll force not to execute a SQL count query. And now I'll not redeploy application, but I'll try this trick. I will make page definition file and then open application. You see that now the scroll bar is not reflecting total number of rows. And by the way, this trick with page definition compilation was working fine because the change is applied. So it's much faster instead of redeploying. And okay, what it means now that with row count threshold -1, a SQL count was not executed. So ADF UI doesn't know about the total number of rows in the row set. So it just brings default scroll bar. Now the user scrolls and more rows are fetched. Then user scrolls and again more rows are fetched. So this kind of works like on Facebook, for example. When you load the Facebook page, you don't get all the information at once, but then once you scroll, you get fetched more data. And this again is a very important optimization. Now it's not for list, but for the table, as you see. And it happens to see to me in a project when with default behavior with row count threshold 0, page is loaded and users they were scrolling just to the end of the row set, and the ADF application was stuck again because of the same reason that too much data. ADF was trying to fetch just too much data at once, and then all the tables were all the iterators for the tables were set with row count threshold -1 to prevent SQL count execution, and then to prevent constructing this scroll bar to be able to scroll to the last record, and then users are scrolling only, for example, 25 rows each time as a range size, and not this allows to ADF to perform much faster and not to be blocked by the large fetches in the large tables. Okay, there's a question. We use transient views with a single row to enter stored procedure parameters. How to configure these views? So if the view is transient and it has single row to enter stored procedure parameters, then in that case, probably we don't care about how much data is fetched because it's a single record row and it's used just for data entry. But probably you may get a problem if during passivation activation the data can be lost if it's a transient attribute and transient view object. And if passivation happens, then during next activation, this view object will lose parameters. And if you don't recalculate parameters manually on passivation activation, they'll be lost. And of course, you can force passivation for programmatic view object as well. You can try to go to view object, and in tuning section, you can check this checkbox to include all transient values, and this would force view object to passivate even transient view object. But of course, you should test if it works in your case. Okay, the next question. Can we override count query for complex read-only view objects to simplify count execution? Yeah, I think you can override it. You can go to view object implementation class and there's a method estimated row count, and you can let me see. Let me create Java class, Java implementation class for this view object. And I'll go to the source. And here this option to override methods. And this standard method gets estimated row count. So you override this method and put custom logic here, and then instead of calling super get estimated row count, you can call your logic. Okay, then the next question is, can we see other questions too? So we'll have some knowledge. I think this webinar allows to share only one screen, but at the end everything is recorded, and I'll post it on the blog, so you'll be able to watch it and listen again. The next question is, what would be the optimal row count threshold value for a programmatic view object populated from the web service, which retrieves all the rows in one call? Okay, so row count threshold value is firstly set not on view object, but it's set on page definition, right? So it's set on iterator. And then it doesn't matter if your view object is programmatic or not. You can set row count threshold value in the same way. So if you set, especially since your view object is populated from the web service, then you must set row count threshold to -1. Then this would force not to execute select count for your programmatic view object, and then it should work fine, I think. So you should set it to -1. The next question is it a good recommended practice to have range size -1, so it doesn't do row count for large tables? So let me repeat myself in this for this question, that you should not mix range size and row count threshold. If you set a range size to be -1, this means ADF UI will fetch all the data from the database table to ADF UI. Even this data will not be presented to the user. Even user will see only one single record in his form on ADF UI. Then if you have range size -1, still all the data will be fetched. So it's important actually to have positive value for range size in order to prevent fetching too much data to the UI. But if you want to avoid row count execution, then you set row count threshold -1, and this will not execute select count for the view object which is coming through the iterator. Okay, then okay, there was a comment from one person saying that who was asking previously about programmatic view object and row count value, that iterator, that view object, okay, that there is iterator and iterator is based on view object, so that's fine. So you should just set row count threshold on iterator in page definition. Okay, this should be clear enough. So we set row count threshold to -1. We don't get complete scroll bar, but at least user is prevented to fetch all the rows at once and kill WebLogic server with a large fetch. Okay, let's see the next. The next one is initial query overridden. I don't have sample application for that, but I can explain it quickly using the same application here. So I'll define view criteria for this view object. For example, I'll search for the first name using starts with operator, some basic criteria. Then I go to the web page and I'll drag and drop this criteria on the web page. From the data controls, I open my iterator, go to the name criteria. Here is the one, employees view criteria, so I drag and drop it somewhere here as query panel. Don't need that. And for the query, I'll set result component ID to point to the panel collection. So another common mistake that I see in the projects that when we have idea query, developers they point as a result component ID to the table instead of panel collection. But very often, toolbar is resides in on a panel collection level, and then if some button from the toolbar is conditionally enabled or disabled based on the number of the rows in the result set, then this button is not refreshed when we do search. And instead of pointing to the table, you can point result component ID to panel collection. And then once the data is searched and result set is updated, then the toolbar will be updated as well. So I point to panel collection. Okay, and now I will add some code in order to log SQL statements, executed SQL statements. So I go to employees view object, and firstly I'll copy paste method I was using in the previous sample, create instance from result set. So I'll see how many rows are fetched. And I'll copy paste ADF logger. I'll fix the class name, and I would like to include some other methods as well. There's a method just overridden to print information once the SQL query is prepared to be executed with bind variables. And this one, it calls my private method log query statement with bind variables. So it will print information about the SQL statement. And also it will print information about criteria, the criteria that is applied. Okay, all the imports are in place. Okay, and I can run my application. I want to restart it. Probably I'll need to define ADF logger class again for this application. Let's see. Okay, so I have criteria and the table. Okay, and for this use case, okay, let me double check in logger. Okay, I have employees for implementation here, and let me switch it to info. Then let me also change criteria to be auto-executed by default. And okay, instead of using table, I quickly will drag and drop a form. So I'll be similar record form with foundation controls. That's fine. And the last thing, instead of using old result component ID, I will change it to be panel form. Fine. Let me run it again. And now I should be able to see number of SQL statements executed, as well as number of rows fetched. And then I expect SQL statement to be executed 2 times, and then I'll show how to tune it to be executed only 1 time. Okay, so in this case, if there is query is executed for default row set and select statement is executed, that's fine. And let me just double check page definition, criteria. This in this simple case, it seems to be working fine. But I seen in complex cases that in some real production systems that when ADF query is used on a header and then there's a results form or a table, then ADF executes one select statement for the query and then another for the table, and just overrides the query select statement from the query. And in order to prevent this for initial execution, as a hint, I want to share with you, you can go and change initial query overridden to true. And this would make sure that when for the first time query component is rendered, then it doesn't generate the default query statement. Here it was not reproduced now, but you should keep in mind that you can control query execution for the ADF query criteria with true property for initial query of the reader. Okay, then let's move on. There's another topic is skip validation. So let me open another application tabs validation app. This one. And then here, again, I'll open page definition. And then here on the root tag for the page definition, I already set skip validation true. By default, it's false. It's false, and let me run application and show you how it behaves with default skip validation false. Okay, close that. So now here I have two tabs, and both tabs are rendering row from the same view object from employees. So here we have employee ID, first name, last name, email, and phone number. And then in the details, information for the same employee is rendered: his hire date, job ID, salary, manager ID, and so on. So it's the same view object in it's rendered in two tabs. Then we click create, and then here let me type values for the required field in the first tab, like 999 test and test for the email. Then I go to the second tab, and I get error saying that hire date and job ID is required. So this hire date and job ID I even cannot set right now because it's in the second tab and I cannot navigate there. So the first thing that I would think how to solve this, I would probably go to the fragment and set immediate true for the tabs, but this would not help me. But still, I would like to show you the behavior in order to understand it completely. So immediate true, it allows to skip validation lifecycle and to go further, and it allows to submit a request. So I set for the first tab immediate to be immediate true to skip validation lifecycle and to allow user to open the tab. Okay, and I open the same application. Click again create button and I type here 999 test and test again. Now I click on the detail tab. Now I can open it. And here I provide hire date and I provide information job ID. Then I try to save it, and now error again. Yeah, now it says that employee ID, last name, and email is not set, but it's actually set here. Only that because of immediate true on the tab, when immediate true is used, then ADF skips data update event, and this data it exists on ADF UI is not propagated down to the ADF model. And then entity object it still fails and it thinks that there is no data provided. There are workarounds how to push this data to the model even with immediate true, but at the same time there's a bit more elegant solution that I'll show you now with skip validation. So I go to the tab and set immediate back to false for contact and for detail. And then I go to the page definition, and here on the root tag for the page definition, I set skip validation true. And this magic property, it allows to postpone validation execution, not to execute it when ADF UI change happens, but execute it on actual commit. So from the do the ML. Now I save it, and in order not to restart, just compile this page definition file and open again application. Now I click create, provide data for the first tab, go to the second, and you see there is no validation at this time, and value for the job ID. Click save, and now the record is saved to the database. So now data from the first tab was submitted correctly to the model, and data from the second tab as well, and this allows to implement correct behavior for such use case when row from the single when the data from the single row is spanned across different tabs. Okay. Now I'll go to, hopefully this one is clear. So let's go to the next. Next topic is immediate validation for the table. And okay, table and validation is quite painful topic because usually this validation in the table component in ADF, it happens randomly, and users, they try to create new row and try to insert data, and validation is fired for the attributes that user is not typing yet, and so on. Okay, so the sample I have is this one, and here let me open. Yeah, and by the way, I have a question. Someone asked how we can delete a new row without validating the row for the required attributes. Skip validation doesn't seem to be working. And I have exactly in my list, I have a sample application for this, and I think I'll be explaining this somewhere here. Mm, somewhere I had this sample application. If not, I can quickly implement it. It's quite easy. So okay, firstly I have my page with the table, and in order to answer this question, okay, I have create button here, but let me drag and drop also delete button additionally to the create. So for, let me see, okay, it's a detail instance of employees, fine. So from jobs, from the detail employees, I'll go to operations and drag and drop and delete operation. ADF button, and set disabled property to be always enabled. Then this table I set with immediate true, I set default false. Let me deploy it, and I'll show how create and delete behaves for the required fields by default. Okay, I scroll to the next record with detailed data. Let me create a new row here. And you see, I just new row was created, and I went to enter employee ID, and immediately validation errors for all the required fields were fired, and this is completely not user friendly, and users they hate this. And there is a property on table that allows to prevent this behavior. So what we can do is we can select table component, and in properties from behavior, we can go to immediate and set it to true for the table component itself. Then I open application, again go to the second row, create, and now I can type values without getting validation errors, and only if I save, only then errors are reported. Okay, now this is for create, so we can resolve it with immediate true on the table. Now if I try to delete, I get error saying that I cannot delete because actually these fields are required. So this is also, in most of the cases, not user friendly because user should be able to delete the row even there are validation errors, right? So I can resolve this simply by setting immediate true for the delete button. For the delete button, I go and set the immediate true property in the behavior, right? And then I simply open again the same application and will insert again a row and try to delete it. So I insert the row and let me generate errors. Fine. And now I delete and row is deleted. So simply immediate true is doing the job. So I hope that answered the question. Now the next topic. The next topic is post changes. So this one is a bit more tricky one. Let me copy this link and I open the description. So in order firstly to guide you through the description of this problem in order better to understand it. So we have, let's say that we have a PLC call function in a database, and this function is doing calculation sum on salary from the total salary table, from the employees table, and it just calculates total salary for the employees. And then there are a couple of custom methods on application model, and one of them, yeah, it's one of them is just calling this function that I showed earlier, and it retrieves back the value total salary. Okay, and then on the UI we have data that shows employee information, and then there is a button prepare for update, and this button I think what it does, it's posting data to the database. Let me double check. Post control application. Open the fragment, page definition. Yeah, there is a prepare for update. It's a custom method on application model. Yeah, this prepare for update is simply doing post changes from the ADF to the database. And I think my application model, let me check configuration. Yeah, the application model configuration. We have there's non-default setting because I see that enable application model pooling is disabled. By default, this one is enabled, and this means that your application model, when the setting is enabled, it works in a such way that it makes sure that the data between requests are preserved, and it keeps this data in memory basically. But in stress test situations when there are concurrent users, then ADF is still switching application model instances between users, and this means that user may get during a session different database connection. So obviously, when application model is assigned with different database connection, your data that was posted to the database, it will be lost. And this is a very common error, uh, especially in systems where we have Oracle Forms modernization to ADF, when we want to reuse a lot of PL SQL code. And if we set data from ADF with post changes, and then if we expect in the next request to fetch the same data, then we'll fail because there's very high chance that in the next request ADF will get another database connection, and our data that was posted to the database it simply will be inaccessible. So let me show you this. So I disable application model pooling, and this means that I will simulate the stress test situation. So when this checkbox is removed, then ADF works always like in a stressed mode. So on every HTTP request, it will leave a database connection, and on the next request, it will get a new database connection. Okay, let me run this application. Actually, to this application, I think it have detail lock enabled. So because I would like to show you how the passivation happens. And here in run debug profile, default profile, I have debug output console, and in order this output to be applied, I need to restart WebLogic instance. So it stopped, and when it will start now, the proper logging should be enabled. Okay, and there is another question. What if it's not a table but a form? This probably relates to this delete button. So I think there's no difference. I don't see the difference. It should behave the same for the form component as well. Because if the delete button is set with immediate flag, it should ignore validation errors. Another question is sometimes I have a problem with the number of connections opened in my data source. They reach to the limit of open connections and I need to restart the data source. I check my code and I have configured range size to 25 in my pages, and my view object in batches of are configured to 1. The problem may relate to that because you said that my page will request 25 times my view. That's right. If that's right. No, this is not right actually, and let me explain and clarify this a bit. So yeah, the object will even if batches of is set to 1, and if the range size is equal to 25, the object will do 25 requests, but it will do this request uh, during one call to the database. So it will open call to the database and then it will do 25 requests. So the database connection still will be the same. And in your case, you're running out of database connections only because you're using default settings for application model. And then um, when new user comes to the application, Yeah, when new user comes to the application, then for this user, new database connection is created and application model is assigned with this connection. So, and especially if your application have some 5 application models or 10 application models, and then 10 users will come to your application, then it will be multiplied by 10. So it will be 10 users will use already 100 database connections. And in order to tune this, then there is another setting, and I have a blog post for this. Let me first open the blog post so you may get you you may note it down. There was a blog post posted on 2011 on November. This one. It's about do connection pooling and TXN disconnect level. So you need to set on the application model configuration. You need to open it and you need to set property disconnect application model upon release. This will make sure that after each HTTP request, when HTTP request is done, for example, table is loaded or form is loaded or create or delete, update or something is done, then uh, then ADF will release database connection and release it back to the pool. And this means another user who will come to the system, this user will not create a new connection, but it will use already open connection. So this is one property, and the second property that you must use when you use disconnect application model upon release is GBO TXN disconnect level must be set to 1. Because if you don't set it to 1, ADF on each request it will release database connection, but what it will do, it will passivate and activate all the temporary data to the database PSTXN table, and this will slow down your application. But with GPO TXN disconnect level 1, it will not passivate this data when database connection is released back to the pool. It will not passivate it to the database. It will keep it in memory in the logic, and it will be it's really fast. And I was doing stress test, and with those settings, do connection pooling equal true and GBOTX and disconnect level 1. In average, application performs even around 20-30% faster comparing to the default settings. And then, as you see here, in the graph, you see that database connection usage is much better. Connections are resolved, but then those connections are released back very fast. So your data source will not grow out of the database connections. So again, this one you can check it on 2011 November, and there's a blog about stress testing DFBC applications with do connection pooling and TXN disconnect level 1. Okay, hope this answers the question. Let's go back to the post changes. So here, let me find some record with salary, and let me change it to 800 maybe. Then show total salary 64, and now I change it to 20,000. Prepare for update. Show total salary, and it remains 64. And even if I change it to 50,000, I click prepare for update, show total salary, and it still remains 64. And this is because data is posted to the database. My changes are posted to the database, but uh, I I bring these changes back with show total salary button with another button, and this button calls another method in the next request, which calls PL SQL procedure. this equal function, sorry, which is doing a select statement to calculate the total number and return it back. But because another database connection is assigned at this time and the posted data is lost. So if I go and check in a pooling and scalability, enable application model pooling setting back. So I'll, in this case, my application model will work under not under stress test anymore. And now, as I'm only one user on this computer, so basically passivation will never happen because I'm only a single user. So my data will be posted, and on the next request, because enable application model pooling is set, I'll get the same database connection, and I should see the changes. But as I said, in production system, you will have concurrent users, and then ADF will start to switch application model instances between these users, and users will get different database connections, and data posted to the database will be lost. It's okay to post data to the database only in one case, if you post data and then in the same request you do commit, for example, or you do some another operation and you don't need to post data in another request. Okay, so now total salary is 64. If I go here and I set it to 80,000 and press prepare for update, show total salary, and now it's changing. It's shows 72. It's because data was posted to the database, and in next request, because still the same application model instance was available to me, still the same database connection was available, I was able to fetch data from the database. But this is very dangerous, and uh, you should be careful because sometimes you feel like, okay, it will be easier if I just post data to the database, I call some PLC call there, and in the next request I get correct results. But uh, you might you may get very big errors in production if you will not if you don't properly understand this post changes of functionality and how the GDBC connection is managed in ADF. Okay, so hopefully this one is clear, and let's go to, let's see what is the next on the list. There is not enough, there is half an hour more, so let me maybe switch to different topics and cover something from ADF mobile because it's at the end and I still want to cover some topics from there. Let me go and speak about master detail, how to implement, how to reuse master detail in ADF mobile from business components. Okay, and ADF mobile implementation, as I'm running on different gdeveloper version, and as you know, there are a couple of gdeveloper versions available. So unfortunately, I need to switch between. And web service part, I'm running on gdeveloper 117, and then ADF mobile running on gdeveloper on the latest gdeveloper version 11240. So I have here mobile application for master detail, but firstly I would like to go for the web service part. Okay, here's the web service implementation, and here we have regular business components. is departments and employees, master detail, entity and the object. So regular business components, master detail. And then in data model, I see I have three level master detail departments, then employees, and then there's employees who subordinates. So this one is a manager, and here we have employees from the manager, and finally these managers belong to departments. So three level master detail, and then we generate web service. So in service interface, I have defined only master view object for the departments. So from application model, only departments is exposed directly in the web service. And when you expose view object for the web service, at least one operation must be exposed. Otherwise, this view object will not be visible in the web service. So I just expose get by key. And then in order to fetch data easier from this master view object, I have defined view criteria and exposed it for the web service as well. This one is basic view criteria. It just selects data from department name. It starts with operator and bind variable. And you see that null values are ignored. So if department name is null, then all the data just simply will be fetched. So it's quite simple. Then and there is nothing else about master detail in the service interface. So this is only about the master view object departments view. And master detail relationship are generated completely automatically by ADF business components. This somehow is not mentioned very clearly on documentation, but it works. Only thing you need to do is on view link, for example, between departments and employees, you need to define custom property service process children with this name, service process children, must be true. And then on the runtime, view object which includes master web service which includes master view object, and if this view object have a view link relationship with another view object, and if this view link contains service process children true, then data control is generated in such way that we can access the detail objects as well, and not only on the first level from the master, but additionally on the third level as well. So, to test this view object, I simply go to implementation class, right click and select to test web service. Now GDeveloper compiles everything and it will start local WebLogic instance here and deploy web service, and it will become accessible. So when it starts, I can switch to another developer where I have ADF mobile extension installed. So this mobile master detail web service application, it consumes web service that was implemented in this another application that I was just talking about. And here in the data controls, I see that master detail web service is created with find departments by name criteria. I can open it, and here I see that result is returned. So here I see on the first level is a master data with ID, name, location ID, and manager ID. And then there is detail employees view with detail data. And then there is a third level of detail with subordinates with the same data. So this data control was generated simply by from GDeveloper by going to GDeveloper wizard and here selecting data controls and using web service data control. ADF Mobile supports only web service data control, and it does not support Java proxy data control from the web service because of the JDK 1.4 is used for ADF Mobile, and it does not support complex types. Okay, let's see. Let's see on GDeveloper web service part. Web service was started and it's operational and is accessible, and it runs on Windows virtual machine. And my ADF mobile, it will run on macOS with another GDeveloper instance installed on macOS. And here I just will try to deploy this ADF mobile application to the simulator. It compiles all the classes and creates a project with bundled Java virtual machine, light virtual machine that is packaged into deployment profile and is sent to the iPhone simulator in this case. But the great thing about ADF Mobile is that the same application can be deployed to Android, for example, just you would need to use different deployment profile. Like in here, I have deployment created for ADF Mobile. Okay, my simulator is started here. Then this is a mobile application that I was deploying just now. So now it starts and it connects to my virtual machine, to the web service, and the web service is fetching data from the Oracle database. And because it's on everything runs on the same notebook, so it's a bit slow, but still it's loading fine. So here we have master data for the departments. I can scroll and I can select master record for the IT. Then it brings managers from the IT department. So it's first level, second detail, and then I click on this guy and it brings second level detail, subordinates. So you see master detail, it works, and I go to another master, select another record, and so on. It works. And here, if I go and check page definition files, I see that only 3 pages are implemented as for departments, employees, and subordinates. On master page definition, I have a result coming from the master. Then on employees, I have a result coming automatically from employees, which is detail of departments. And here, GDeveloper doesn't show correctly, but this result actually comes from the second level detail. And only when you will be developing for ADF Mobile, you should keep in mind there's one big difference between ADF Mobile and regular ADF. ADF Mobile is stateless, so it does not remember the state of your data when you move between ADF Mobile pages. So when you select data here, for example, you select IT department, and then in the task flow, navigation is implemented from departments to employees, from here to here. When this navigation happens, ADF forgets about the row that was selected in departments. It does not remember anymore. So here, when I click on shipping, I come to employees. By default, we'll get a wrong list of employees because not because master detail is incorrect, but because current row from the which is selected in departments is simply lost. So because of that, we need to pass this row, which one we select. So in departments, for example, I have property listener, which is copying data from the current department ID to page load scope. And then once we come to employees, actually when page definition is loaded for the employees, I'm using such thing as invoke method action. And this invoke method action is executed when page definition is just initialized, and it calls invoke set department key method. So it invokes, yeah, it invokes this set department key method, this one. And this method, at the end, it's nothing special. It calls standard method for the set current row with key. It calls the standard method for the master, and it's using value from the page load scope for the department ID. And this means once again here we set current row with key for the master, and then it's how detail then is synchronized correctly. In normal ADF, we don't need to set key again because data control is shared, and then key for the view object, which is used across different page definition, then the key is preserved, but it's not in ADF model. Okay, so this is about master detail. Let's see a couple of topics more, what we have. Let's maybe stick with ADF mobile, and I'll go through mobile login and secure web service access. So I'll switch back to my virtual machine where I have secure ADF basic authentication application. This application is nothing special. It just contains ADF security implementation and one empty page. So when this application is deployed, it's protected by ADF security, and it contains the user. So ADF Mobile is used to authenticate against this application, which is deployed on WebLogic server. So I can start it. So I'll be able to ping it from ADF Mobile. And then there's another web service application which implements secure web service. This application, it contains one view object, one entity, and yeah, I don't need this. Close it. And here we check implementation class, and I'll check annotations. Then in order to enable my web service to be secure, what I need to do is simply in service implementation class, I need to provide security policy. And there are different policies, but as I was testing, the easiest one to configure with ADF business components and with ADF mobile is username token service policy. So this policy it asks on each web service access, on each request it asks for the username, and then it checks if this username is located on the WebLogic server security provider, and if yes, it allows access, otherwise no. And here I have a custom method which is exposed for the web service. Test secure access. And if the call is successful, then it just prints here, it prints the message that the access was successful. Okay, let me deploy this one to the server and switch back to ADF mobile. So here, firstly, I would like to enable login, right? And login can be enabled in, let me open feature XML here, and there's one feature implemented. This means only one page, home page, and this page is protected by security, and credential authentication is remote. Another option is to use local. If you use local, then you can authenticate against the WebLogic server, and then you can set a time period, for example, 10 days, and in these 10 days, for these 10 days, credentials will be stored in your mobile device cache, and only after 10 days they'll expire, and user will be forced again to go to the internet from the mobile device and can authenticate for the next 10 days, for example, to the WebLogic server and to get new credentials. For this test, I'm using remote, and then on ADF MF application XML file in security, I have defined login server, which points to my virtual machine, and it points to this basic authentication application that I just deployed. So this is about security, and then when you generate web service, web service data control, then everything is generated for you, but you must go to connections XML, and here you will find first connection reference to security provider for the login, and the second one will be for the connection reference for the web service. And here, ADF Mobile automatically will pass your username credentials from ADF Mobile to the web service. Only one thing you need to do is for the connection for the web service, you must set ADF credential store key, and the store key value must be equal to the same value as connection for the login page. So here we have ADF basic authentication access, and the same value must be for the web service. So then on runtime, the web service will share the same credential store key that was used in the login, and will use it to log into the web service. So this application, of course, always also is available on the blog. You can download, or you can just Google for it. And web service is up and running, so I can start. I can deploy this application to the simulator. There's a question if I am going to post the recording and send the link to everyone. Yes, I'm recording it, and I'll post the video tomorrow or day after tomorrow on my blog. You will see the post. All the projects that I'm using here are available on the blog, but what I'm going to do, I'll post this plan for this webinar, which includes topic, it includes the application name, and it includes the URL to the blog post where you can find description of this application and also download this application. So don't worry about that. You can review everything afterwards as well. Another question is, do we need Oracle Web Service manager installed to use username token policy. I think you need to have web service policy manager to be installed, but you can install it once you set up your WebLogic domain, and there's a checkbox to install it, and it gets installed for you. I think when you when you create a new WebLogic instance on GDeveloper, this internal WebLogic instance, WebLogic policy manager by default is applied. And I know that when you create a standalone WebLogic, you need to select WebLogic policy manager as well. Another question is if I could post the logging of SQL in ViewObject. Yes, I'm planning to do in the next post. Maybe it's on my to-do list. I'll do this. Okay, that's questions answered, and let's go back to the navigator. And here is the application. So I open it, and here is out of the box login screen is loaded. I was not implementing it; it just provided out of the box by ADF Mobile, and I can use user from WebLogic. When I click login, it goes and authenticates. Authentication was successful, and here I have a button to test web service. I click it, and then it makes a connection. Connection is done, and I go back to the application. I see that the message was printed and secure web service was successfully. So that's about ADF Mobile, and probably the time is going out. And the last topic I would like to show you is related to the new patch set 6 release and table pagination. This very popular feature, which was in 10G, but then it was removed from 11G, and now finally it's again returned back. So let me run it. The only thing that I was testing it, and I saw that this issue with this table pagination. If let's say you have two pages, and then in one page you select a certain row with certain key, and then you would like to navigate to the second page where you have a table with pagination, and if your selected row is not in the first page, then this row is never get displayed. So what I'm saying is that the page, if the row is not in the first page, then it doesn't happen to load the second or third page from the table automatically. It doesn't happen to show selected row with the current key. So here is the table in patch 6, and if pagination is enabled. So if this table is a standalone table, then it works well. I can go through the pages, I can scroll through, I see the data. Also on runtime, I can change the page size and increase it sample. Or if I don't want to show this table with the range page, I can simply as well switch to paging, or I can switch back. The only thing that you should keep in mind, let me show you. Let's open ADFC config, and I'll quickly create another page. Say select, and there was another question saying that immediate true for delete button doesn't work for the single record frame. Okay, I'll need to test this. I'll test this and I'll follow up later. Okay, select page is created. Now I drag and drop here uh, employees. I will drag and drop a form with navigation controls and submit button. Then I'll define flow case between select and main, with table and with form. Then from select page, I'll define navigation for the submit button. This will be point to table. And on table, I'll define a button to navigate back. And that's it. I'll then okay, it was a fragment. Okay. Right here. Unfortunately, I cannot convert it so easily here. So let me create just a fragment. So drag and drop this one. And here it will be select view. Go to table and navigate back to form. Here on submit button, I'll set table, and finally on here I'll drag and drop button to navigate back somewhere next to change button. And default one will be select view. Okay, so I'll run this application. So it should bring my first fragment with the form. And here I go and make sure to scroll to some record in the second page. Steven 1 to 8. Click submit. And I see still the first page shown and the record 1 to 8 is not shown. Fine. And what I could do is I could try on a table to set selected row, display selected row. There is a property in behavior, display row selected, but this also doesn't work. So I think it's a bug in current release, and just if you have a use case where you have a form and then you navigate to the table with pagination, then this would not work. Now it's selected, this user is shown, but the pages number is incorrect, and if you try to go to another page, then the data remains the same. So just wanted to give you a warning about it. Okay, so probably we are done. Not all the topics were covered, but still most of them. And this recording will be posted on the blog, and I'll post as well uh, plan for this webinar with all the links and with all the links to the sample applications. So thank you, Juan, for attending. Thank you for your questions, and I'll try to organize it sometime after some time again, after some months. And thanks a lot for reading the blog. Enjoy coding ADF. Bye.